"Get out of my gym." The 220-pound MMA fighter Derek Walsh towered over Sarah Miller at the Atlanta Combat Center. His massive frame blocked her path as she tried to access the training area. "Women like you belong in yoga class, not here with the real fighters." The crowd of gym members erupted in laughter as Derek mockingly flexed his muscles. Someone started recording. Sarah stood motionless, her weathered hands steady at her sides. For a brief moment, her sleeve shifted, revealing a faded tattoo, military insignia partially visible. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she took a measured breath. They had just humiliated the wrong woman. I wonder where you're watching this story unfold from today. Whatever corner of America you're in, you've probably witnessed someone being underestimated before. Perhaps you're in a bustling city like New York, or a quiet town in the Midwest. Or maybe you're viewing from the sunny shores of California. Wherever you are, I'm sure you've seen the look of surprise when someone proves their doubters wrong. But rarely does it happen quite like this. Sarah's background, Sarah Miller, had always been a woman of few words. At 38, a slender frame and quiet demeanor often led people to underestimate her. She lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the east side of Atlanta, the kind with faded vinyl siding and balconies, just big enough for a single chair. It wasn't much, but it was enough for her and the collection of medals and commendations she kept in a plain wooden box at the back of her closet. 8 years had passed since she'd been honorably discharged from the U.S. Army Special Forces, one of the first women to complete their rigorous combat training program. 8 years since she decided to step away from military life and find a quieter path. These days, Sarah worked as a physical therapist at Peachtree Rehabilitation Center, helping athletes and accident victims regain their strength and mobility. Her colleagues respected her knowledge of body mechanics and her gentle but effective approach with patients. What they didn't know was that her understanding came not just from textbooks and training, but from years of intense military preparation. Sarah had made a conscious choice to leave that life behind, to build something new without the pressure and intensity that came with special operations. The unit insignia tattooed on her shoulder remained covered by her clinic scrubs or casual clothing, a private reminder of who she had been. Finding her way 2 years ago, Sarah's father, James Miller, had passed away after a brief battle with cancer. A former Army Ranger himself, he had been her inspiration, her cheerleader, and her rock throughout her military career. His absence left a void that Sarah struggled to fill. For months after his funeral, she would visit a small private gym on the outskirts of town, working through the hand-to-hand combat drills he had taught her since childhood. It was her form of meditation, of connecting with her father's memory. She kept his dog tags in her gym bag, a tangible link to the man who had taught her that precision and patience were more powerful than brute strength. The idea to try mixed martial arts came from one of her patients, a college wrestler recovering from a shoulder injury. "You know," he'd said during a session, "with your understanding of body mechanics, you'd probably pick up MMA really quickly. It might be a good way to process some of that grief you're carrying." Sarah had laughed it off initially, but the suggestion took root. She began watching training videos, practicing basic moves in her living room, slowly building confidence in this new discipline. There was something appealing about the challenge, about proving to herself that she could adapt and grow in civilian life while honoring the skills her father had helped her develop. After months of solo practice, Sarah decided it was time to join a proper gym. Atlanta Combat Center had a solid reputation and offered classes for all skill levels. It wasn't until their third visit that she encountered Derek Walsh, the gym's self-proclaimed star and the owner's nephew. The antagonist Derek had built a respectable 15-win, 2-loss record in regional competitions and cultivated a following online with his flashy style and uncensored commentary. He was used to being the center of attention, to having newcomers defer to his expertise and established members acknowledge his status. Sarah's quiet focus and quick learning curve had not gone unnoticed, and not in a good way. The morning of their first confrontation, Sarah had arrived early to practice some basic combinations on a heavy bag. She wore simple black leggings and a loose long-sleeved shirt, her brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Nothing about her appearance suggested her military background or the years of elite combat training that had shaped her mind and body. She was just another new face in a gym full of aspiring fighters and fitness enthusiasts. Derek and his entourage entered the training area like a small parade, their loud voices and boisterous energy filling the space. Sarah continued her work, focusing on her form and breathing, until Derek deliberately bumped into the bag she was using. "Sorry, didn't see you there," he said with a smirk that suggested otherwise. "We need this area for some actual training," his friend snickered, already forming a semicircle around the interaction. Sarah stepped back, no desire for confrontation clouding her features. "No problem," she said, moving to gather her things. As she reached for her water bottle, Derek grabbed it first. "Nice form for a beginner," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But this isn't Curves Fitness. We train serious fighters here." He tossed her water bottle across the room, where it clattered against the wall and rolled under a weight rack. More laughter followed as Sarah quietly retrieved it and left the area, feeling the eyes of everyone in the gym following her retreat. The escalation that first encounter set the tone for what became an escalating pattern of intimidation and exclusion. "He does this to every woman who doesn't fit his idea of what belongs here," explained Melissa, a kickboxing instructor, as they changed in the locker room. "Either you're eye candy for him and his buddies, or you're a target." The warning did little to prepare Sarah for the systematic campaign that followed. In the days and weeks that came, she found herself subjected to a multi-layered gauntlet of humiliation designed to drive her away. It began with the gym members themselves, many of whom took their social cues from Derek. When paired with Sarah for drills, they would either go too easy, treating her like glass, or unnecessarily rough, testing her resolve. In the locker room, she overheard comments about her age, the mom trying to be cool, and her build, too skinny for this sport. A group of women who regularly attended the same class would cluster together, leaving Sarah isolated. Even those who seemed sympathetic remained silent witnesses, unwilling to challenge the gym's established hierarchy. "Just quit before it gets worse," one woman advised her quietly. "That's what I almost did. It's not worth the stress." Derek and his inner circle elevated the harassment to an art form. When Sarah signed up for a spot in his advanced techniques class, Derek used her as the demonstration dummy, applying holds with unnecessary force that left bruises on her arms. His friends created practical obstacles, hiding her gear when she set it down, taking equipment she had reserved, deliberately crowding her space during workouts. They nicknamed her Grandma, despite her being only 38, and the name caught on throughout the gym. During circuit training, Derek would assign Sarah impossible variations of exercises, setting her up for public failure. "That's all you've got?" he would ask loudly when she struggled. "Maybe try the senior citizen class next door." No support system, the gym's management, influenced by family ties to Derek, provided no refuge. Sarah's first complaint to the owner, Frank Walsh, was dismissed with a wave of his hand. "That's just how fighters are," he said, not looking up from his inventory spreadsheet. "If you can't handle a little trash talk, this probably isn't the place for you." The front desk staff frequently lost her class reservations, forcing her to either leave or join classes already at capacity. During group sessions, trainers gave her minimal attention, focusing instead on members with more seniority or those in Derek's circle. The billing department accidentally charged her account twice 1 month, and when she pointed out the error, the manager suggested with thinly veiled contempt that Planet Fitness might be more your speed and budget. The humiliation extended beyond the gym's physical walls. When Sarah attempted to join online forums for local MMA enthusiasts, her questions about techniques or training approaches were met with mockery. "Let me guess," wrote one user whose profile picture showed him alongside Derek. "You started last week and now you're an expert." Her application to participate in a local tournament was rejected, citing experience requirements that seemed selectively applied. At a community demonstration event, organizers placed her with absolute beginners despite her quick progress, while promoting less skilled members who had Derek's endorsement. Veterans of the sport dismissed her strategic insights during discussions, though the same points would be praised when repeated by male members. The public humiliation, the situation reached a new low when a local sports blogger visited the gym for a feature on the growing MMA scene in Atlanta. The resulting article, "Fitness Tourists Invading MMA: The Dilettante Problem," included a photo of Sarah struggling with a complex move, captured at her most vulnerable moment. The piece never mentioned her by name, but used her image as the face of casual enthusiasts who dilute the sport's intensity and tradition. The article went viral within regional fighting circles, accumulating hundreds of comments. Worse still, some of Sarah's physical therapy clients saw the piece, leading to awkward questions about her professionalism and commitment to her primary career. Through it all, Sarah maintained her composure, showing up consistently for classes and continuing to improve despite the hostile environment. In private moments, she would touch her father's dog tags and remember his advice from her Special Forces training days. "Let them underestimate you. That's when you have the advantage." She focused on her technique, studied videos at home, and made incremental progress that went largely unnoticed by those determined to see her fail. Each humiliation became fuel. Each obstacle a chance to demonstrate the mental toughness that had once made her an elite soldier. She wasn't fighting for her country anymore. She was fighting for the right to define her own path without intimidation or judgment. The turning point one Wednesday evening, after a particularly grueling class where Derek had singled her out for criticism. Sarah lingered in the empty gym long after others had left. She moved through a series of combat forms with fluid precision, her mind clearing of the day's frustrations as she focused solely on her body's movement through space. The rhythmic pattern of her breathing centered her, much as it had during covert operations when the slightest sound could compromise a mission. She didn't notice Frank Walsh observing from the doorway until he cleared his throat. "You're getting pretty good," he said, surprising her with what might have been his first direct compliment. "Been watching you these past few weeks. You've got unusual discipline for a beginner." Sarah nodded her thanks, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected acknowledgement. Frank stepped further into the room, his usual brisk business manner softened by the late hour. "You know, we're having our annual member challenge next month, open to all levels. Might be a good opportunity to test yourself against others." There was something in his tone that Sarah couldn't quite identify, a mixture of curiosity and assessment. "I'll think about it," she replied, though the idea of subjecting herself to more public scrutiny held little appeal. Frank nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "My nephew can be intense," he said, choosing his words carefully. "The fight game gets into some people's heads in unhealthy ways. Just so you know, it's not personal." But it had become personal, as Sarah discovered the following day when she arrived to find her name already on the challenge registration list, prominently displayed in the gym's lobby. Derek stood nearby with his usual entourage, his expression transforming into a predatory smile when he noticed her confusion. "Heard you signed up for the challenge," he called across the room, drawing attention from everyone present. "Uncle Frank mentioned it. Brave move for someone at your level." He sauntered over, invading her personal space with deliberate intimidation. "Even try to show up and you'll regret it," he said, voice lowered but still audible to those nearby. "Some things aren't meant for everyone. Wouldn't want you to get hurt trying to keep up with actual athletes." The statement hung in the air, a public challenge that demanded a response. Sarah looked him directly in the eyes, something she rarely did with anyone at the gym. "I'll be there," she said simply before moving past him toward the locker room. Preparation. The exchange sparked a wave of whispered conversations and speculative glances. Derek's friends doubled down on their harassment in the days that followed, as if determined to break her resolve before the event could test their champion's dominance. Rumors circulated that Derek had designed specific parts of the challenge to ensure newcomers, particularly Sarah, would fail spectacularly. Despite the intimidation campaign, Sarah continued her training with renewed focus. The challenge had given her something concrete to prepare for, a defined goal that harkened back to her military days. In quiet dawn sessions before work and late evenings after her regular classes, she refined her techniques and built her endurance. At home, she reviewed recordings of previous year's challenges, studying the patterns and expectations. When the weekend before the event arrived, she made a previously unplanned trip to a secluded training facility where an old military buddy owned a specialized combat gym. There, away from prying eyes, she refreshed the advanced techniques that had once been second nature during her service. "This is for you, Dad," she whispered as she packed away her gear, feeling more centered than she had in months. The challenge the day of the competition arrived, bright and clear. An early autumn Saturday that drew a larger crowd than usual to the gym. Local enthusiasts, friends and family of participants, and a few curious onlookers filled the designated spectator areas. Sarah arrived early, wearing the same unassuming workout clothes she always wore. Her hair tied back neatly, no makeup or flashy accessories to draw attention. She registered quietly and began her warm-up routine in a corner away from the clusters of excited competitors. Derek made his entrance 20 minutes later, surrounded by his entourage, wearing custom gear emblazoned with his personal logo and sponsors. He made a show of not seeing Sarah, though his gaze swept past her location several times as he greeted fans and signed autographs. The challenge began with strength events, deadlifts, pull-ups, and a weighted sled push. Derek performed impressively, as expected, setting high marks for others to chase. Sarah completed each event with solid but not spectacular results, earning surprised nods from judges who had clearly expected less. The middle segment focused on technical skills, grappling escapes, striking combinations, and defensive maneuvers. Here, Sarah's military background in hand-to-hand combat and her hours of careful practice began to show. She executed each task with precision and efficiency, her movements economical yet effective. Derek's group noticed her improving performance, their expressions hardening as they conferred in whispered conversations between events. During the obstacle course portion, Sarah maintained a steady pace until she felt a sudden push from behind as she navigated a narrow balance beam. She stumbled forward, nearly falling, and turned to see one of Derek's friends quickly backing away with an expression of exaggerated innocence. "Watch your step," he said with a smirk. Sarah regained her balance and continued, her ankle twinging slightly from the awkward recovery. She finished the course with a respectable time despite the interference, but the incident had been noticed by several spectators who murmured disapprovingly. The final test, the final segment of the challenge, was announced with some fanfare by Frank Walsh, who took the microphone with theatrical enthusiasm. "For something different this year," he declared, "we've added a combat simulation component. Competitors will demonstrate defensive techniques against an aggressor in a controlled environment. Let's see who can apply what they've learned under pressure." The announcement caused a stir among participants, many of whom had practiced techniques but never applied them in such a public setting. Derek, standing at the front of the crowd, laughed loudly. "This should separate the real fighters from the hobbyists," he boasted to those around him. His gaze found Sarah in the crowd, and he added more loudly, "Let's see if Grandma can even remember the basic moves under pressure." As the competitors prepared for the final challenge, Sarah hung back slightly, her expression unreadable. Frank explained that participants would demonstrate defensive moves against trained partners, with judges scoring based on effectiveness, control, and technique. When Sarah's turn approached, She removed her windbreaker for the first time that day, revealing a faded Army Special Forces training shirt underneath. The garment, clearly years old and well-worn, nonetheless drew immediate attention. A hush fell over the nearest spectators as recognition slowly spread. One of the judges, a middle-aged man with military short hair, looked up sharply. "Wait, is that a Delta Force insignia?" The question rippled through the gathering crowd, reaching Derek just as Sarah stepped onto the demonstration mat. Memories washed over her as she centered herself. Her father drilling her in hand-to-hand combat in the backyard. Rain pouring down as a teenage Sarah practiced takedowns again and again. The grueling selection process for Special Forces, where she'd outlasted dozens of men through sheer determination. Missions in remote locations where her combat skills had meant the difference between life and death. "Some opponents don't respect your badge or your gun," her father had told her. "That's when you need to know how to use your body as a weapon." The recollection strengthened her resolve as she waited for her demonstration partner, now the center of intense curiosity from everyone present. Derek pushed forward through the crowd, a smug smile on his face. "I'll volunteer to help the lady out," he announced loudly. "I'll go easy on you, Grandma." The instructor overseeing the demonstrations hesitated, looking to Frank for guidance. The gym owner nodded slightly, his expression giving nothing away. Sarah showed no reaction as Derek took his position opposite her on the mat. The instructor explained they would demonstrate a defense against a frontal attack, with Derek playing the aggressor. "Just a controlled demonstration," the instructor emphasized, looking meaningfully at Derek. "Contact, but no power, understood." Derek nodded dismissively, bouncing on the balls of his feet with poorly concealed excitement. "Ready when you are," he said to Sarah, his tone making it clear he saw this as an opportunity to publicly humble her. Sarah stood relaxed but alert, her stance deceptively casual to the untrained eye, but instantly recognizable to anyone with combat experience as a position of maximum readiness. The moment of truth, the instructor signaled for them to begin, and Derek moved forward with more speed and aggression than the demonstration called for, clearly hoping to overwhelm her with his size and strength. What happened next occurred so quickly that many spectators would later disagree about the exact sequence. Sarah sidestepped slightly, her left hand deflecting Derek's reaching arm, while her right struck a precise point at the junction of his neck and shoulder. Simultaneously, her foot hooked behind his ankle as she used his forward momentum against him. Derek's 220 pounds frame suddenly pitched forward and down, his balance completely compromised. He hit the mat with a solid thud that seemed to echo across the suddenly silent gym, his body limp from the perfect nerve strike. For several heartbeats, no one moved or spoke. Derek lay on the mat, momentarily stunned by the precision strike to his brachial plexus. Sarah stood calmly beside him, no triumph or malice in her expression. The spell broke when the judge with military bearing began to applaud, followed quickly by others until the sound filled the space. Derek pushed himself up, his face a complex mixture of humiliation and disbelief. His friends stood awkwardly at the edges, unsure whether to rush to his aid or maintain distance from his public downfall. "That's what we call a one-hit incapacitation technique," Sarah explained to the crowd, her voice carrying the practiced tone of an instructor. "It doesn't rely on strength, but on precise knowledge of the body's vulnerable points and leverage. Anyone, regardless of size, can execute it with proper training." The crowd's reaction swelled again as people realized they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Derek shrugged off attempts to help him, avoiding eye contact with anyone as he retreated to the edge of the mat. His entourage hesitated, torn between following their leader and witnessing the unfolding scene, before drifting after him in ones and twos. Frank Walsh stepped forward, his promoter's instincts kicking in. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it seems we've been privileged to have an elite military operative among us all this time. Sarah Miller, former U.S. Army Special Forces." The crowd's reaction intensified, phones emerging to capture the moment and search for confirmation of Sarah's identity. Derek pushed through the spectators, avoiding further attention as he disappeared into the locker room. Sarah found herself surrounded by curious gym members, fielding questions about her military experience and combat techniques. She answered politely but briefly, uncomfortable with the sudden attention after months of deliberate anonymity. The aftermath in the days that followed. Sarah's status at Atlanta Combat Center underwent a dramatic transformation. Members who had previously ignored or sought her out for advice on form and technique. Women at the gym specifically approached her after classes, sharing their own stories of intimidation and asking for guidance. The local sports blog that had featured her so unfavorably now reached out for an exclusive interview. A light warrior hidden in plain sight. The Sarah Miller story. Frank Walsh, ever the businessman, offered her a free lifetime membership and a position teaching a women's self-defense course. Derek's popular online accounts went conspicuously quiet as comments about being dropped by a woman half his size flooded his most recent posts. Sarah found herself at a crossroads she hadn't anticipated. Private security firms called with lucrative offers. Military contacts reached out about training positions. Combat sports promoters suggested exhibition opportunities. Paths she had deliberately closed suddenly reopened, presenting routes back to the world she had left behind. After careful consideration, she declined most offers but accepted a limited role at the gym, developing a practical self-defense program focused on real-world applications. Her focus, she decided, would be on creating a supportive environment for those who felt vulnerable or intimidated, particularly women who wanted to learn effective protection techniques. Derek's absence from the gym lasted nearly 3 weeks. When he finally returned, he moved through the space like a shadow of his former self, training alone during off-peak hours and keeping interactions to a minimum. Sarah noticed the change, but made no effort to approach him, respecting his process and focusing on her own classes. It was Derek who eventually bridged the gap, appearing at the door of the studio where she was setting up for an evening session. "But a minute?" he asked, his voice lacking its characteristic swagger. Sarah nodded, continuing to arrange equipment as he stepped inside. "I've been doing some thinking," he began awkwardly, "about how I behaved toward you and others." He paused, clearly struggling with the unfamiliar territory of apologizing. "My uncle made it clear that what I did crossed a line, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because you had every reason to hurt me badly that day, and you didn't. You could have embarrassed me completely, made me look like a total fool, and instead you were professional about it. That means something." Sarah set down the training pads she'd been organizing and gave him her full attention. "That wasn't my goal," she said simply. Derek nodded, looking at the floor. "I know that now. It made me realize I've been so focused on looking tough that I forgot what real strength is. The guys I hang out with, they disappeared the minute I wasn't the top dog anymore. Made me think about who I've been and what I've been building." He finally met her eyes, genuine emotion breaking through his carefully maintained facade. "Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it, and I'd understand if you wanted me to find another gym." Sarah considered him for a moment before responding. "This was your space long before it was mine," she said. "I'm not interested in pushing anyone out. That's not why I came here." She picked up a focus mitt from the equipment pile. "You know, I noticed a vulnerability in your guard during the challenge. If you're interested, I could show you how to fix it." The offer hung between them, a potential bridge across a chasm of their own making. After a moment's hesitation, Derek nodded, a small but genuine smile breaking through his uncertainty. Growth and transformation. What began as a tentative professional exchange evolved over the following weeks into a respectful, collaborative relationship. Derek's technical skills improved under Sarah's guidance, while her teaching approach benefited from his years of competitive experience. The dynamic between them transformed the gym's culture as well. Derek's former entourage drifted away, replaced by serious practitioners drawn to the more focused training environment. New members, particularly women who might have been intimidated in the past, joined in growing numbers, attracted by Sarah's classes and the gym's evolving reputation for technical excellence rather than machismo. For Sarah, the experience brought unexpected healing. She began wearing her father's dog tags openly, no longer hiding that part of her history. She spoke more freely about her military experience when asked, though never boastfully. Elements of her special forces training became integrated into her teaching, not as war stories, but as practical wisdom about focus, discipline, and precise execution. Occasionally, she would invite interested students to join her for specialized drills, introducing them to the mental toughness and tactical thinking that had shaped her approach to combat. Several, including Derek, discovered a new depth to their practice, creating a core group of dedicated students within the gym community. 6 months after the fateful challenge, the Atlanta Combat Center hosted an exhibition featuring its new comprehensive self-defense program. The event drew attention from local law enforcement, women's groups, and several specialized publications interested in practical civilian protection techniques. Sarah led the demonstration, her confidence and expertise evident in every movement, as she guided a diverse group of students through a series of realistic scenarios. Her class included former critics and newcomers alike, all following her instructions with focused attention. To the surprise of many, Derek assisted with demonstrations, his previous arrogance replaced by a studied concentration on proper technique and respectful interaction. Full circle, as the exhibition concluded to enthusiastic applause, a young woman approached Sarah with visible nervousness. "Is it true you were in Delta Force?" she asked, eyes wide with admiration. "My brother was in the military, and he told me about your demonstration." Sarah smiled, her hand unconsciously moving to touch her father's dog tags, which she now wore openly around her neck. "I served," she acknowledged simply. "But that's not the most important part of who I am." The young woman persisted, curious about Sarah's journey and apparent transformation. "How did you go from special forces to dropping a professional fighter with one move? That's such an incredible story." Sarah looked around at the community that had formed around her, at the space that had transitioned from a source of pain to a place of growth. "Some battles are won not with strength," she said thoughtfully, "but with precision and dignity. That lesson applies everywhere, not just in combat." She watched as Derek demonstrated a technique to a group of new members, his instruction patient and precise. Sometimes the strongest statement isn't dominating someone else. It's refusing to let them dictate who you are or what you're capable of becoming. Frank Walsh approached, clapping a hand on Sarah's shoulder with newfound respect. "We've got interest from 3 more gyms wanting to implement your program," he said, excitement evident in his voice. "Could be the start of something big." Sarah nodded, appreciating his enthusiasm without fully sharing it. Her goals remained modest, creating a space where skills were valued over intimidation, where precision and respect took precedence over posturing and exclusion. The expansion of her influence was a welcome side effect, not her primary motivation. Reflection later that evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the gym had quieted, Sarah found herself alone in the training area, going through a series of movements that blended her military training with her newer teaching approach. The space felt different now, no longer hostile territory to be navigated cautiously, but a place where she belonged on her own terms. She had not sought vindication or revenge, had not set out to change the gym's culture or Derek's attitude. She had simply refused to be defined by others' limitations or expectations. The rest had followed naturally, like the perfect execution of a technique practiced thousands of times until it became instinct. Outside the windows, Atlanta's lights glimmered in the early evening darkness, a constellation of human activity and ambition. Sarah thought about all the people in that urban landscape carrying hidden chapters of their own stories. Veterans working ordinary jobs, quiet professionals with extraordinary pasts, simple women with complex capabilities. Her story was just one among millions, notable perhaps only in its momentary visibility. Tomorrow, someone else's hidden strength would be revealed. Someone else's patience would be rewarded. Someone else's precision would find its mark. The quietest people often carry the most powerful stories. Here in America, we sometimes forget that everyone has hidden chapters we can't see. The woman bagging your groceries might be a former special operator. The quiet man on the bus could have saved lives in combat. The unassuming physical therapist might have served in our nation's most elite military units. If you were Sarah, would you have forgiven those who mocked you, or would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community, where we celebrate quiet strength, real struggles, and unexpected victories. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.